Tonight on Reporting Scotland, business rates rebellion as an Aberdeen hotelier calls for a nationwide boycott. 3 Labour-run councils are to freeze the basic rate of council tax as 4 more local authorities put them up.
I'm at the National Galleries here in Edinburgh, where they're putting on a light show to save one of Scotland's most iconic artworks.
The Motherwell manager Mark McGee was banished to the stand after clashing with match officials and then with opposition fans. Further touchline bans could be imposed on him as a penalty. Also in the programme, the launch of Europe's biggest science festival celebrates all things Scottish. Good evening. An Aberdeen hotelier is calling for a nationwide boycott of new business rates. It says he'll refuse to pay any increases. New rates come into force in April after a national revaluation. Stuart Spence, who owns the Markliff Hotel, argues that a complete rethink is needed on how rates are calculated. However, the Scottish Government point out that an extra 100,000 businesses will now pay nothing at all. Rebecca Curran reports.
A busy lunchtime at the Markliff Hotel in Aberdeen, but owner Stuart Spence isn't celebrating. His business rates are set to rise by 25%, an extra £1,000 a week. At the same time, turnover has plunged by 40%. Mr Spence is refusing to pay the increased rates and is calling for a nationwide boycott.
I'm going to continue to pay my old rates, which is £253,000 a year, in which I ask for nothing until I have a satisfactory answer to my appeal.
Are you concerned about any possible legal ramifications from doing that?
Yeah, that's fine. Bring it on. I mean, I would love to go to court and challenge it.
Rates rises aren't confined to the hospitality sector. The managing director of this nursery and 4 others in the west of Scotland will see her bill increase by £56,000 a year.
It's hugely concerning because a lot of people initially say that's okay, you'll be able to charge that back to the parents, but there's obviously a ceiling to what we can do there, and there is a saturation point where we will come to this stage where once again parents will say, well actually we can't afford to go out and work.
And many other businesses in Scotland will be affected. This laundrette in Glasgow will see rates more than double, the restaurant next door almost 4 times as much. The Scottish Conservatives are calling for an immediate review of the revaluation, but the Scottish Government say thousands will now pay nothing at all.
What we've been able to do is take a number of decisions that should support business, such as increasing the threshold for the small business bonus to £15,000. That will lift about 100,000 businesses out of rates altogether.
Businesses like this one can appeal their revaluation if they think the assessors have got it wrong, but that will take time. One thing's for sure, this rates row looks set to rumble on. Rebecca Curran, Reporting Scotland, Aberdeen.
So why are some businesses facing big increases while others are not? Our business and economy editor Douglas Fraser explains.
I've travelled all the way to my place of work, the BBC headquarters here in Glasgow, which is liable for non-domestic rates, as are other offices, factories, warehouses, schools, hospitals, a bothy, a telecom mast, a salmon beat. Now, the bill's based on the annual rental value of the property, and that can go up or down at different rates. It depends on the business sector it's in and on location. 7 years ago, the value placed on renting this was £3.75 million. Along with office rental in this area, it's going up 15%. Now, that's not the actual bill. The bill is based on a poundage, a rate levied on each pound of that valuation, and that's roughly half the annual rental cost. In the case of the BBC here, £2.1 million from April. Now, that's quite a hike, but in the tourism sector, there's much bigger rises. That hotel across the Clyde there its rateable value is going up around 50%. The bill's going to be about £570,000 a year. Now, there are catches around this. Big properties are paying a supplement, and around 100,000 smaller properties are exempt. So what does all this add up to? In total, £2.8 billion this year. That's to pay the government bills, to pay for your public services. And business isn't going to pay more in total, it's just going to pay different shares depending on properties that have risen or fallen relative to others. Some will pay more and some will pay less. Those who pay less tend to make less of a fuss about it. All of which might explain why governments have been feared to do anything to revalue homes for council tax purposes. They've been stuck for more than a quarter of a century without revaluation. More than half of us are reckoned to be in homes that are in the wrong band. Now, we might be furious if our council tax bill were to go up by a band or two, but more than half of us are probably paying far more than we should.
Douglas Fraser. 4 people have been arrested in Slovakia as part of an investigation into human trafficking, which also saw the arrest of 5 people in Glasgow last week. The operation has so far uncovered 16 possible victims of trafficking, with officers from Police Scotland, Slovakian police and Europol involved in the raids in the Slovakian town of Trebisov. Police Scotland said it was very much a live and ongoing inquiry. 4 men have appeared in court in Slovakia. Glasgow University has been granted planning permission by the City Council for a £1 billion redevelopment project. It'll see the university expand into the old Western Infirmary site next to its current campus. The plans include new research and teaching buildings. Aileen Clark reports.
Its 19th century tower may be one of the city's famous landmarks, but Glasgow University has a whole variety of buildings, old and modern, spread around University Avenue, all the way down to Byres Road. Now the Western Infirmary next door has closed. The university wants to transform that site from one where patients of the past were treated to a centre pioneering cures for patients of the future. That vision, though, spreads far beyond just medicine or indeed Glasgow. Mixing it up, they say, could bring big rewards.
Here we will produce a campus that will innovate, there will be an innovation quarter, and Glasgow University will be at the centre of that translation of research into real economic activity for Scotland and driving key industries like quantum technology, like precision medicine, which are key to the future of the Scottish economy.
As well as prestigious research, though, universities are competing to attract students from around the world. They've doubled the number of international students here in recent years, so there will be new lecture theatres and study areas to encourage more. West End shops saw a dip in trade with the closure of the hospital, and there have been some objections to the proposal, with concerns new on-campus shops and cafes will take trade rather than spread spend. Concern the university is keen to calm.
We think actually it will create an extra buzz which will attract more people to the West End. So we really want it to be part of this community. Where we're standing now will be a new square. It'll be a square similar to many of the other large squares that we have in Glasgow. And we want that to be used by the university but also by the people of Glasgow.
Outside of graduations, you won't see many members of the public wandering around this part of the university. This is really the preserve of students and their professors. The redevelopment plan will last 10 years, but 5 years from now, that square down the hill should be in place and handier for everyone, whether your degree is from here or from the University of Life. Aileen Clark, reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
Now, earlier we heard about business rates, but tonight there's news that 3 Labour-run councils are voluntarily to freeze the basic rate of council tax, even though this adds to the pressure on their budgets. South Lanarkshire, Renfrewshire and Inverclyde councils all decided against increasing bills for the majority of local residents. But the move leaves them open to criticism from anti-austerity campaigners. Well, our local government correspondent, Jamie McIver, is at Glasgow City Council for us tonight. Jamie, the council elections are just, what, about 2.5 months away? Would we be right to think that this might not be entirely coincidental?
I'm sure that's a factor in council decision making right up and down the country, Sally. Now here in Glasgow, the decision today was to increase the basic rate of council tax by 3%, but I think it's very interesting that we've seen 3 Labour councils now confirm that they intend to go ahead with a voluntary freeze, so the majority of bill payers in those areas won't see any increase at all. But there's definitely an element of risk to that strategy. For a start, they leave themselves open to accusations by anti-austerity campaigners that by not raising the council tax, they're not doing all that's within their power to at least mitigate any local cuts and savings. Well, the Scottish Government may well say that a council which decides against raising the council tax can hardly complain about how much government funding it's getting. Certainly an element of risk. And tonight there's speculation a 4th Labour council, Aberdeen City Council, where Labour is in the driving seat, though with support from others, may also decide to go for a council tax freeze. No confirmation yet, but we should get some solid news from them early next week. Of course, I make the point, it's a freeze for the majority of people in some areas, but everywhere in Scotland, the bills in the higher property bands will increase because of national changes to how the bills are calculated.
McIver in Glasgow, thank you very much. It's one of the country's best-known paintings, and now the National Galleries of Scotland is making a final fundraising push to buy the Monarch of the Glen. The current owner, the giant drinks company Diageo, is selling the 19th century masterpiece and has offered it to the National Galleries for what's described as a knockdown price of £4 million. Our reporter John McManus is in Edinburgh for us tonight. John.
Yes, as you can see, Sally, the National Gallery's really making the point about the Monarch of the Glen this evening. This iconic painting, which has meant so much to so many people throughout the years. It's carried so many meanings about Scotland. It was painted in 1851, but the current owners, Diageo, say they're going to sell it. They say it's worth £8 million, but they're offering it to the National Galleries if the galleries can offer them £4 million, so half price. But can they do that? Well, I'm joined now by the Gallery's Director General, John Layton. John, this is a fantastic offer, but can you raise that money? Because time is running out.
Well, we had 4 months to raise £4 million, a very generous offer. We've had some amazing support from the Heritage Lottery Fund, from the Art Fund, a charity that supports acquisitions for museums. So we've reached £3.25 million. 4 weeks to go, £750,000. I think we can do it, but we're reaching out to anyone who has an interest in Scottish art, culture and heritage to help.
Every penny counts, obviously, but what happens if you can't secure all this £4 million? What happens to the painting then?
Well, that's obviously a question for the owners, Diageo. I think there's every chance that it will be sold and probably end up going abroad, and we will have missed a unique opportunity to bring this a fantastic, resonant, powerful image back to Scotland, where it can be the subject of debate and delight for future generations.
John Layton, thank you very much. Well, the deadline is March the 17th for this deal to be done between the National Galleries and Diageo. The clock is ticking, Sally. Here's hoping it can stay in Scotland in the hands of this public gallery.
John McManus in Edinburgh there. Thank you very much indeed. You're watching BBC Reporting Scotland. It's 18 minutes to 7. A reminder of tonight's top story. Business rates rebellion as an Aberdeen hotelier calls for a nationwide boycott. And still to come, we meet the Farming brothers aiming for sporting glory in the Winter Olympics. The Motherwell boss and Scotland assistant manager Mark McGee could be in trouble again with his part-time employers at the Scottish Football Association. During angry scenes at Pittodrie last night, McGee was sent to the stands during his side's heavy defeat to Aberdeen. Afterwards, he said a match official had an agenda and a diabolical attitude. Gerardina's son has more.
It was enough to make a manager's blood boil. With his team already 4-0 down and on the way to an even bigger defeat, a clearly furious Mark McGee is sent to the stands by referee Alan Muir. The dismissal came about, though, on the advice of the fourth official John McKendrick, and it's he who bore the brunt of McGee's ire pitchside and in the interview room afterwards.
It was disgusting, actually. I'm horrified that the fourth official took the attitude he took, because I had nothing really you know, I wasn't even getting excited about the fact we were losing the game. I wasn't losing my patience. I wasn't losing my temper. I was having a bit of a laugh actually. But you know, right from the very first minute, the fourth official seemed to me to have made up his mind, the attitude he was taking. And to be honest, you know, he spoiled the game for me as much as the 7 goals did. You know, really his attitude was diabolical.
If the attention of a police officer was unwanted, Mark McGee's evening appeared to get even worse when he got up to the stand to find a fan filming his arrival. But it's not that outburst which could land the Scotland assistant manager in further trouble. When asked post-match if he would consult the head of referees John Fleming, McGee replied, "John Fleming, I'll be speaking to a lawyer. I can only think there is an agenda." Mark McGee has already served a 2-match ban this season for abusive or insulting language towards a match official in November. It was a miserable night all round for Motherwell, who shipped 7 goals at Aberdeen, the pick of which came from on-loan midfielder Ryan Christie. But it's his words post-match that may yet hurt the manager more. Following Mark McGee's comments, we contacted Motherwell, the Scottish Football Association here at the National Stadium, and senior figures from the refereeing world, none of whom wished to comment, some for fear of prejudicing a possible disciplinary case. What is clear this evening, though, is that the SFA, who employs Mark McGee as assistant manager to the national team, will want to hear his explanation for the strong criticism of one of their own officials. Kerdy Nidsan reporting Scotland, Hampden.
Now let's take a look at other stories from across the country. A man has died after a fire broke out at a house at Kildonan on South Uist. The emergency services were called to the property at shortly before 8 o'clock last night. Meanwhile, a man who died in a house fire in Lossiemouth in Murray yesterday afternoon has been named as 88-year-old Kenneth Hall. He was in the property on Elgin Road when fire crews arrived at the scene shortly after 4 o'clock. St Mirren Football Club is one of 15 companies named by the UK Department of Business as guilty of failing to pay employees the national minimum and living wage. The biggest offender here was Crossroads Caring Scotland, which failed to pay more than £17,000 to 40 workers in Clackmannan. Members of Muirfield Golf Club have begun voting in a fresh ballot on whether to admit women members. The postal ballot will be independently scrutinised and the outcome's expected next month. A similar vote last year narrowly failed to achieve the 2/3 majority required to change club rules. Commuters crossing the Forth and Tay bridges have saved about £2,000 each since tolls were abolished by the Scottish Government in February 2008. Councillors in Aberdeenshire have agreed to promote the historic Doric dialect better in schools. Teaching of the language won't be compulsory, but the authority says all pupils should develop an understanding of it as an integral part of their education. Doric is the northeast dialect of the Scots tongue. Jumpers are being knitted for so-called discriminated against dogs that an animal welfare charity finds among the hardest to rehome. Dogs with dark-coloured coats are being overlooked at Scottish SPCA centres in Inverness and Caithness. It's thought the dogs' features don't show as well in photographs. Scottish Women's Institute groups have been knitting the jumpers as part of celebrations marking 100 years of the Institute. The Scottish Curling Championships start this weekend. The winners will represent Great Britain at the World Championships, where they can qualify for the Winter Olympics in South Korea next year. And that's the aim of 2 curling brothers who share another passion, but also a keen rivalry, as David Curry's been finding out.
Thomas Muirhead is eyeing up the Scottish title and a place at the Winter Olympics. So is elder brother Glenn. That's why they are spending as much time as they can on the ice.
Whoa!
Away from the ice, the Muirhead brothers are busy boys too. That's why I've come here to the heart of the Perthshire countryside to see them going about their day job.
Curling and farming, they've both been in the family right from the very onset, you know, so I mean, the two, they're working well and we're very passionate and we love both.
We work well together, which is the most important thing really. We've both got our own things that we
specialise in, and you know, we pull together when we need to. We'd be stuck without each other, really.
At this time of the year, Thomas and Glenn have their hands full pretty much all the time.
The lambing always comes about the same time as the Scottish Championships, and we've just learnt to really work around it. You know, we schedule things in so there's sheep lambing before and post Scottish Championship.
So you'll be down in the farm during the day, then onto the ice at night, and then probably back out in these barns at night.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, with the wellies back on.
Straight from the ice rink into the lambing shed, make sure there's no problems, and then catch up on a few hours sleeping in, do it all again the next day.
It's all about Team Muirhead down on the farm. Not so on the rink. Thomas is all about Team Smith. Glenn, Team Brewster.
Yeah, we're best of friends off the ice, but when it comes to the crunch, you know, there's no friends in business, really.
If one of your teams gets to the Winter Olympics, the other brother will be here minding the farm.
That's it. Well, hopefully one of us is there for a start, and that's exactly the case. You know, we'll be absolutely pulling out all the stops for each other if one of us is at the Olympics.
Wouldn't you know it, the Winter Olympics might just coincide with the lambing season. David Curry, reporting Scotland, Perthshire.
It was the world's first science festival, and it's still the biggest in Europe. The Edinburgh International Science Festival has unveiled its programme for the year, featuring hundreds of events in dozens of venues over 2 weeks in April. The launch included a police box, a toaster and your other national drink. Our science correspondent Kenneth MacDonald was watching.
OK, what's going on here? Certainly some of the onlookers seem a little confused. The presence of the press gives it away. It's the programme launch for this year's Edinburgh Science Festival. The phone, just one of a long list of great Scottish inventions. And the police box? Let's get to that in a minute.
We were the world's first, and we're still one of the largest science festivals in the world. We've got a 2-week programme that takes over 30 venues around the city, hundreds of events for families, for teens, for adults, ranging from a brand new exhibition at the National Museum of Scotland called Play On, to our City Arts Centre, activities, 5 floors of hands-on fun, and a big programme for adults as well.
One of the things the festival is doing this year is drawing up a list of all the great Scottish inventions. For example, the telephone. Sherlock Holmes, he's one of ours. The paraffin lamp. The toaster. And iron brew. Other spellings are available. Steamships and iron bridges are another 2 on the list, to be displayed in one of 4 police boxes on the mound.
Unfortunately, I can't cram everything into just 4 police boxes, but I'm focusing on the Age of Enlightenment, the Scottish Industrial Revolution, 101 Scottish inventions, and then bringing it forward to modern day and celebrating the information age.
What we're going to do here is make a cloud.
Our connected world is just one of this year's big themes, and if previous years are anything to go by, the serious stuff for grown-ups will be balanced by hands-on fun for everyone. But does it all have a lasting effect? Does it win hearts and minds for science?
We genuinely believe that science is integral to so many parts of people's lives, that it's relevant to everybody, and we just need to find the right ways of reaching them. So we do a bit of science by stealth programming, we program around food and drink, in the knowledge that all we have to do is ignite a little spark of interest.
The festival starts on April the 1st and runs for 2 weeks over the Easter holidays, which gives us plenty of time to work out what the birds' heads were all about. Kenneth MacDonald, reporting Scotland, South Queensferry.
Our timeline, as ever, is on BBC 2 at 7:30. Here are Shireen and Glenn with the details.
On tonight's timeline, new figures show Scots spend more on booze than people in the rest of the UK. Would restricting sales tackle that?
Poking fun at the politicians, Ian Hislop on how satire is engaging a whole new audience.
Plus, the West Wing actor Richard Schiff talks to us about making a Scottish anti-Trump hashtag go global.
I don't tend to live my life insulting people, but I think in this case it adds a little bit of fun to the fury.
And Amy MacDonald is live in the studio.
In the meantime, let's see how the weather's shaping up, Chris.
Sally, thank you very much indeed. Hello there, good evening to you. Well, after all that rain that many of us had this morning, it did improve in the end. Lovely picture there from one of our weather watchers in Aviemore. And tonight, largely dry, in fact, quite cold compared with last night, all thanks to this ridge of high pressure sitting overhead, keeping things dry and settled. But a warm front in the southwest will mean some outbreaks of rain at times. For many, though, it's a dry night, and where those skies clear, it will be cold. There'll also be some mist and fog, particularly for central and southern Scotland. So in towns and cities, we're looking at overnight lows around 2 to 4 Celsius, in the countryside, freezing or just under. Thicker cloud in the southwest, that's that warm front, and that means across western parts tomorrow, cloudy skies, a few spots of rain. For central southern Scotland, largely dry, but fairly murky at times. Best of the sunshine, Caithness, Sutherland, in towards Murray and Aberdeenshire, but even here, the cloud will tend to increase through the course of the day. So by mid-afternoon, largely dry but fairly cloudy. Once again mild, 9-10 Celsius, and winds generally light inland. The odd spot or two of rain around the west and northwest, that's that warm front, and still holding on to the sunshine across the northeast, where we'll see temperatures into double digits. Caithness faring well, indeed Orkney and Shetland not too bad either. Now the rest of the afternoon into the evening and overnight, and fairly cloudy. We'll start to see winds picking up around the west coast, and a change of foot as we head overnight in towards Saturday, because this weather front sweeps in off the Atlantic, bringing outbreaks of rain. So certainly a pretty wet start to start the weekend. Here's the details for Saturday, and you can see outbreaks of rain across the west, edging their way eastwards, but by afternoon a lot of them will have cleared away. So a drier afternoon, some spells of brightness coming through, breezy from the southwest, but temperatures up to 12, maybe 13 Celsius. And the mild theme continues as we head through towards Sunday, but there will be some outbreaks of rain across the west and northwest, in the northeast, potentially highs of 14 degrees. That's the forecast for now.
Thanks so much, Chris. Now a reminder of tonight's main news. An Aberdeen hotelier is calling for a nationwide boycott of new business rates. He says he'll refuse to pay any increases. New rates come into force in April after a national revaluation. The Scottish Government say an extra 100,000 businesses will now pay nothing at all. 3 Labour-run councils are to freeze the basic rate of council tax, but other local authorities, including Scotland's biggest council, Glasgow, have put them up. The new US Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, has held his first face-to-face meeting with his Russian counterpart. It comes in the wake of turmoil in the White House over alleged links between the Trump administration and the Russian government. Rex Tillerson also held talks with the Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, as part of a G20 summit in Germany. That's Reporting Scotland. I'll be back with the late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news. Until then, from everyone in the team, have a good evening. Bye-bye.